Saudi Arabia spans an impressive 2 million square kilometers, ranking as the 14th largest country in terms of land area. Despite its size, 95% of the kingdom is a sprawling, hot desert, predominantly filled with sand and notably devoid of any permanent rivers. The country experiences meager rainfall, averaging less than 150 millimeters annually. Yet, upon closer inspection, Saudi Arabia presents a surprising sight: patches of arable land. Amidst its desert landscape, the country boasts a surprising expanse of farmland where agriculture flourishes, allowing the cultivation of various fruits, a rarity in such arid conditions. Remarkably, most of these farmlands are circular. Today, Saudi Arabia has 35,000 square kilometers of arable land, exceeding the size of the Netherlands and triple that of Qatar, a significant increase from just 400 square kilometers in the early 60s. How did this oil-rich nation expand its arable land so dramatically in such a short time? Discover the innovative techniques Saudi Arabia employed to transform its desert into fertile farmland in our upcoming video. Saudi Arabia may have a lot of sandy dunes now, but things were different around 10,000 years ago. Back then, the region experienced more rainfall, and there were lakes and plants that supported human settlements. Over time, though, things changed due to severe droughts. Even during a tough period called the Dark Millennium, about 5900 to 5300 years ago, when much of Arabia was thought to be uninhabitable, evidence shows people lived around the Jubba oasis. In other parts of northern Arabia, folks built walls around oases, created features to collect water, and dug wells. Even though water is hard to find on the surface, Saudi Arabia has hidden water reservoirs underground, known as aquifers, similar to how they have massive amounts of crude oil. For years, Saudi Arabia has been pumping water from below the ground, mostly for agriculture that involves large-scale irrigation, making it possible to grow crops. But there's a catch to drawing so much water from underground. Aquifers can run out, especially with the heavy irrigation in Saudi Arabia. To save water, Saudi Arabia brought in a technology that made a big difference: center pivot irrigation. So what is it? In 1948, a clever farmer from Nebraska named Frank Ziebach invented a new kind of sprinkler system called the center pivot, and he patented it in 1952. Center pivot irrigation is like a big watering system for farms. It works in circles, and that's why the fields you see at the start of the video look round. The main part is a long pipe that sticks out from the middle. It's held up by towers that can move around the center. This pipe has little holes spaced out evenly along it. These holes spray water onto the crops as the pipe turns, giving them the water they need to grow. This system helps the water travel in a straight line across the field. All the holes in the pipe release the same amount of water, covering the same area. This makes sure all the crops get an equal amount of water. The cool thing about this irrigation is its size. Depending on how long the pipe is, it can cover a huge area, up to 130 acres in a straight line and about 155 acres in a curved line. That's why it's great for big farms. But there's something to keep in mind. The sprinklers near the middle of the pipe cover a smaller area than the ones at the far end. In center pivot irrigation, there are key parts that make it work. First, there's the pivot point, like the center of a spinning wheel. This is where water enters the pipes that move around the field. At this spot, there's a control panel like a computer for the whole thing. It's where the farmer controls the system, starts it, stops it, changes its direction, and how much water it uses. There are different types of control panels, from basic to more advanced ones, depending on what the farmer needs and can afford. Another part is the drive tower, which is the lower part of the machine that sits on the ground. It has wheels and other bits that help it move. Then, there's the tower box that helps control the drive tower, making sure it moves in the right way and for the right amount of time. Center pivot irrigation does a lot for farmers. It helps spread water evenly over big fields, so they don't have to do it all by hand. This saves a ton of work during harvest time. That solves two big problems. It cuts down on how much farmers have to pay for workers, and it makes things more consistent without relying on many people. This way of watering also saves a bunch of energy in the long run. It's much better at using water too. It stops water from running off the fields and makes the water bills for farmers much smaller. Plus, it helps farmers control how much water is in the ground. Because the system moves around and sprays water, it's easier for farmers to keep track of how much water is in the soil. This whole thing uses up about 80% of the water it sprays, which is a lot better than older methods. What's really cool is that this system isn't just for watering crops. It can also spread fertilizer, pesticides, and other important stuff that helps crops grow. That's a big plus for farmers because they can use the same machine for different tasks. In Saudi Arabia, about 2/3 of the fields where they grow crops use a system called center pivot irrigation. This method has been a big help in making a lot of land good for farming. The government encouraged and supported farmers to make more food for the country. But when they started, some farmers had problems. They noticed that the pipes they used in this system were getting damaged because the water they used had different quality levels. So they found a solution. They changed the expensive steel pipes to pipes made of polyethylene, which don't get damaged. These new pipes were put under the old steel pipes, not underground, at about 4.9 to 6.6 feet high. The farmers did this by themselves, using their own experiences and help from experts, without asking the people who usually design these systems. The owners of these irrigation systems change these pipes every 3 to 5 years based on how salty the water is. Back in 1992, almost all the water used for farming in Saudi Arabia came from groundwater that doesn't get replaced naturally. This water was used a lot for the irrigation systems. That's why there were more and more of these center pivot systems all over Saudi Arabia. But here's the catch. These systems are good at watering crops, but they don't actually solve the problem. They just delay it. As more land got irrigated, it put a lot of pressure on Saudi Arabia's water supply, causing problems with having enough water. When they started modern farming, there was a huge amount of water under the desert, like enough to fill up a whole big lake in the US. But over time, they've been using up a lot of that water. Imagine this, they were using up to 5 cubic miles of water every year for the farms. And there's no rain to refill it, because it hardly rains there. A study from a school in London in 2004 said if they kept using water at that speed, they would use up nearly all of it by 2008. Experts think that almost 4/5 of this really old water is already gone. Saudi Arabia has seen some of its once rich land turn into dry deserts recently. It happened in Al-Baida, not far from Mecca, where the people, called Bedouin tribes, had to settle in one place because of a new law. This caused a big problem. Too many animals grazed on the land, and the natural plants disappeared. People started cutting down trees to sell charcoal. Soon, the land that used to be good for farming became just rocky desert. The little rain that came made floods rush away to the Red Sea instead of soaking into the ground, because there was nothing to hold it. The government asked for help from Neil Spackman, who knows a lot about permaculture, and Mona Hamdi, who studies the future of biology at Harvard University. They went to Al-Baida to try to fix things. Spackman lived there for many years, from 2010 to 2018. He made walls out of rocks and dug channels in the land to trap rainwater. Spackman and Hamdi used old ways from the Incans and Nabateans to control the floods and guide the water to the right places. They started planting trees that can survive without a lot of water. By 2015, they had planted 4,000 trees of 10 different kinds, but many didn't survive. Still, enough grew to bring hope. These trees could help bees and animals, block strong winds, make oil from their seeds, make charcoal, and even improve the soil. The project faced problems when they didn't have enough money and had to stop for a while. But when the rain came back, the trees started growing again. Maybe one day, what worked in Al-Baida will work for all of Saudi Arabia, and the whole country will be covered in green. What do you think about this effort to bring life to the desert? Share your thoughts below in the comments. If you want to see more stories about amazing transformations like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for regular updates and inspiring content.